Hey, Walter, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for the invitation, Doug. I appreciate it.
Why don't you tell everyone what you do and let's set the frame for this call?
I help business owners, CEOs who are frustrated with their sales team. They might be frustrated with accountability or they can't retain and attract the right sales talent. And that's where we lend some guidance and help them solve those problems.
Okay, so that's about 97% of people who have sales teams in the world.
It's surprisingly, yeah, there's quite a few folks that have struggled with their sales team because we're crazy.
I've had sales teams from, four people. The largest one was 166 people. And I
Yikes.
can tell you from personal experience, um, it can be frustrating at times for sure. So, so business owners who are in that, or, managers who are in that position, just breathe. It'll all get better, especially if you
It,
reach out to a guy like Walter. So,
if you're not if you start, it's like a golf club. If you squeeze it harder and harder, your arms get shorter, your muscles get tighter, and we hit the ball into the woods. So it's something that we kind of have to take a breath, like you said, and evaluate what we're doing.
I'm laughing because I went to play mini golf one time with some business friends, and one guy was so frustrated that he hit it like he was driving the ball on the on the fairway, and he shot the ball right across the street. And I'm surprised he didn't hit a car or somebody, thank goodness. But it's
Yeah.
when you brought that up, that it was like, oh my gosh. Uh, so Walter, you're an expert in not just salespeople, but you're also an expert in sales. And I wanted to bring you on here because I wanted to talk about when we were talking about the dangers of letting buyers control the sales process. And I see so many people do that. Uh, Firstly, I'd like to ask you the question, why do you think that happens?
I think there's two main reasons. Um, the the CEO, the business owner, think that the salespeople understand how to sell their offering, their product to their buyers. They just think that that's something they're supposed to know how to do. And most don't. They most don't know how to talk about it, let alone take a buyer through that journey. So I think the that first piece is that we need to provide that salesperson the structure, the stages, the steps that we take that buyer through. And if we don't have that in place, they're going to default to the buyer's process, which is, going downstairs, right? It's just going right to the bottom of pricing and commoditizing you like everybody else. So I think that it's really not having it's making the assumption that the salespeople know how to do that, and then not have taken the time to put the right process in place, because that buyer's journey through your organization needs to represent two things. They need to feel like they're being heard. They need to feel that they're getting the information that they need to solve problems. And you, as a salesperson, as a business owner, you need to make sure we're gathering the right information to qualify this person, to make sure that they're worth the effort, and that they fit our ideal client profile.
So the two things were that the CEO or the owner of the company, maybe they were founder led originally, so they think, oh, everybody should be able to sell like I can, so to speak. And
Assumptions.
assumptions. And they're not training the sales team on the full buyer's journey and holding them accountable and testing them and making sure that this process works, or for all you folks in England or Canada, process works the way it's supposed to.
If we don't have that in place, the salespeople don't know what to do. They really
Mm.
just don't have that um, that that process in their head. They just don't get it. So we're making assumptions that they do, right? That's really the big issue. And
Yeah.
that journey needs to be representative of that buyer. They need to feel like they're in control, right? I call it a buyer's first process, right? We're in control as a salesperson if we're taking them through our process, but we want that process to be welcoming, to make sure that that buyer is getting the answers that they need. So when you do create the process, it has to have all of the steps to for the buyer to feel heard and for us to gather the data.
So now, Walter, I would say, well, isn't that my sales manager's job? Isn't that my my, depending on how big my organization, isn't my vice president of sales supposed to be handling this and then passing it down and that type of thing? And if so, why doesn't that happen? Because I know, Walter, you and I have both seen this happen, not happening.
Well, we have statistics that salespeople, there's 6% of salespeople in not just in our country, but across the planet. 6% are what we call elite.
Yep.
And 14% are good. 20% above average, depending upon what we define as average. The rest are just awful, and we don't want them on our team. We don't want them anywhere near our team, right? So sales managers are worse. That the quality sales manager, there's 1 or 2% out there that really understand what their role is, and that role is to manage a process and to coach, right? Not do for, not be a hero, right? So,
Right.
and if it's sort of that principle, like in education, if you can't really teach, they make you a assistant principal, and if you suck at that, they make you principal, and if you're awful at all of those things, you become superintendent. And I know I just offended educators, and I'm sorry.
All hate mail will go to Walter, please, not to me.
Please, yeah, that's fine. Because I worked in the K through 12 market long enough to know that it's true. So in the sales world, it should be the VP of sales or CRO. They should be the ones that are setting that in place.
Yeah.
Right. But what are they starting with? Right. We don't start with a CRO or VP of sales. Typically, we've built a company or we've bought a company, right? There's something that should be in place. So we have some place to work off of. But that sales manager typically isn't qualified to do the work. They've been promoted because they were a top producer.
Right.
And we figured, well, it happened to me. I tell this story all the time. I was at a Christmas party 2 years in a row, top salesperson. The owners of the company say, "Hey, can we see you at the bar?" And I go to the bar and I walk away with, a drink in my hand, and they offered me the sales director position.
Yep.
And I'm like, why'd they do that? I asked why they were doing it, and they say, well, you've been successful. We figured you could help the rest of the team be successful. And I thought, okay, that made sense. I thought it made sense. And I get in the car to go home and tell my wife this what happened, and she's like, well, that's great, congratulations, but have you ever managed anybody before? Right? And boom, the bubble was burst, the balloon was burst, and then she's like, because you could barely manage yourself, right? It's what she kind of put the little sprinkles on that. But it's what happens to most of us, right? We get promoted. So if we don't build those skill sets, it's a different set of skills.
Yeah.
So those sales managers and VPs of sales typically don't have that process, right? They don't understand it either. They haven't been trained. They didn't have that sales manager. So at the end of the day, everything falls to the president, CEO, business owner. And what you started to talk about with that founder, right? That they've done this. Why can't these guys do it? I have that conversation with that entrepreneur. Like, you have this all in your head. You do it naturally. So let's put a straw in one ear and pull out all of that stuff, all of what it is that you do. And then we trick and stage it up, put the steps in it, right? And that's where we start. And I have a best practices sales process, and you mix those two and optimize it for that world where that process needs to go. There's a bit of a collaboration there if you're doing it right. But there's best practices that must be in place. And if we don't have that, and we assume that the salespeople are going to do it, We know what happens when we assume.
I'm going to come to hiring in a moment because I think that's another part of the challenge. I want to ask this question because you're exactly right. I remember when I was in a company, there was I think there was 323 salespeople,
Wow.
and there were the two top producers, myself and another gentleman. They offered him the East Coast. They offered me the West Coast. And I always thought, why would you want to take us out of the field? Right? Because I was out selling 4 teams of 9 together myself, and he was doing something similar. And I'm like, why do you want to take us out of the field? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me because all that revenue goes away, right? You think it's just going to go right to all the other reps? No, that's not how it works. I had the relationships. He had his relationships. And so they would trust us if we were involved in it, but it's not the same thing. So I see this as a mistake many times that I'm not saying that promoting up, just like you were asked to be promoted up, is a bad thing. But as you said, there's two fundamentally different characteristics and profiles between a really good manager and a really good salesperson. And when we take a really good salesperson, I mean, just think about it this way. I'm scatterbrained sometimes as a salesperson, right? I'm creative. I do my thing. Now you want me to manage spreadsheets and accountability on members and
DRM.
right, CRM and all that stuff. And it's like, it's just not in my natural profile. Now, can I do it? Yes. Have I done it? Yes. Have I done it extremely successfully? Yes. But the
But
point
you
is,
worked at it. You
yes,
literally worked at that skill set to get, I have the role, so now I have to get good at it.
yes,
That's not what most people do in that role.
it's a good point.
And because I got promoted again for similar reasons later in my career. And my competitors, we were all friends, salespeople. They're like, "What are you doing? You're gonna lose half your income by becoming a sales manager."
Right.
And he wasn't right, but he wasn't wrong. I lost 30% of my income because I was dumb enough to take the role. And I wasn't dumb enough, I wasn't smart enough to put the right comp plan together to make it work. But they are different skill sets. And again, there's these business owners and entrepreneurs, they just don't know what they don't know. And it's not really their fault. It's their responsibility, but they don't know what they don't know. So they're making assumptions that I got a good salesperson, they should know how to do this. They don't know how to message. They don't know how to follow the process. They don't know how to create a process.
Right.
They might be good at, asking the right questions and being a solid salesperson and be successful, but they're not doing it in a scalable fashion.
Makes total sense. So what about the person who has a small company and let's say they just got one salesperson, um, or they're a founder-led sales company and they're up and coming a little bit more than the average. I mean, I would think, and I'm asking the question, should they be training themselves just like they would be training someone else and creating the process right in the beginning so when they grow that they actually have a process, or should they kind of leave it until they hire somebody?
Um, I mean, ideal scenario, we have all of our systems and SOPs, everything's in place when we start. That never happens, right? Somebody comes up with an idea and creates a product or an offering, and they go out and do it. So would that be ideal? 100%, it would be. But I think what my advice would be to start thinking about that, documenting what you're doing, at least understand why you're having the conversations that you're having. There's another piece of this that we didn't touch on, but that founder, that CEO, that person who's built the company and created, revenue,
Mm-hmm.
they have a title on their business card and credibility with certain people. So there's a little cachet there that the salespeople don't have as well, or
Right.
that don't have. So that's a small factor in it. It's a small factor, but it is there. And they have more passion than the salespeople, right? Because this is their baby, right? When you own a business, my accountant used to tell me it's like having a child that never grows up and always wants money. Um, and there's an element of that. So I don't think that I don't think it's a realistic expectation for that to be started at the beginning. But if I was starting my agency over, there would be a bunch of SOPs that I would have thought about earlier than I did,
Hmm.
right? So that I could delegate faster, right? All the things that we've learned as we've gone.
That, that makes total sense. And that way you're hitting the ground running versus having to recreate this thing while it's in motion, and preventing that chaotic issue from happening that inevitably happens to most people. And then, and I agree with the owner and the salesperson, there's different positioning there too. So it's like, if somebody's an owner of a company and they're going to see another owner or another CEO, it's usually relatively equal positioning. But if a salesperson's walking in, it's not the same positioning.
The salesperson has to really step up that credibility and get there. Like we all put our pants on the same way, right? We all put our blouse on the same way, whatever the appropriate term is. We all do it the same way. So we have equal stature, but salespeople don't think we do, right? That's a
Correct.
mindset issue. But it
Correct.
is much easier when you come in as the individual who started it, right? The perceived kings talking to kings, queens talking to queens.
Makes total sense. Okay, so we have the train them, consistently training them in the right methodology for the full buyer's journey. And let's step back for a second. We don't have them there, or we have one or two salespeople. We want to hire 10 salespeople, whatever we want to do. We don't have the journey in place right now. Should we hire those salespeople? I mean, because there's always the chicken and egg there, right? I need the revenue coming in and I need the SOPs put in place. So is it something we do in tandem? Do we delegate that off to the sales manager? What do we do?
If we're a company that has no salespeople and we're
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to add salespeople to it, I think the first thing is to understand is what we want that salesperson to do. What is it? What are the activities that they need to do every day, every week, every month to be successful? And that's what we look for. So if we understand the target, then we can drive our process to go get that person, because not every sales role is created equally.
Right.
I have multiple things going on now. Like we have an account where we need them to do traditional sales role. Here's a few accounts that we need you to nurture and grow, and then we need you to go get 50% of your role is to go get new business, new logos, right? And then you have other accounts that are just like, here's 12 accounts, don't screw it up, right? Maintain it and grow it. So we have to really be clear about what it is that we want them to do. Because if we have a hunting role and we hire an account manager, they're gonna fail. We're gonna be disappointed. So we'll get clear about what it is that you want them to do. Then the next step really is to recognize that salespeople are different. You can't hire them the same way you hire all of the other employees. We face rejection. We face hostility. We're asked to go out and deal with consumers and other business owners. Our targets, we have competition to get our job right, right? The engineer in the company, they might have competition for getting to the next level, but nobody's coming in and hiding their tools and hiding the product that they've developed or throwing things away, right? That's what happens to us salespeople when we go out into the world. We have competitors.
Right.
So we're different. So we have to go about hiring them in a different manner. So if we don't recognize that and we approach it differently, it's going to be hard to get the right talent. So I think there's a separate process for hiring talent, but talent makes everything else easier.
Yeah. And
Makes accountability easier.
oh, I was remembering when I looked at your website, you had right on the front, are you hiring salespeople the same way you're hiring everyone else? And I thought it was a profound statement because I understand what the personality that you're talking about is. Um, and would I hire would I take my engineer's tools and hide them on that person? Depended whether they were doing the job for me or not, right? As a salesperson, you can be a little bit like, hey, move it, pal. I need this to get done, right? So
Right.
we have that entrepreneurial thought process as well, because we don't get paid unless the job's done. We're not on necessarily an hourly basis, right? We don't look at life that way. We get paid when the money goes into our bank account, and it doesn't go into our bank account unless the sale is closed and delivered and the money is paid.
And
So,
the check clears, right?
and
There's three:
exactly, right?
closing, check, and then clearing the process. It's got
Yeah,
to, that all three have to happen.
yeah, and a lot of sales, a lot of people who are not as experienced in sales. I remember when, on my teams, they would go, "Oh, I sold this," and I'm like, "Great, you sold this. Yeah, my commission's going to be this." Yes, if that check clears. It's like,
And if
well,
we get it,
yeah, what do you mean? So you make sure you stay with this sale all the way through until that check clears, and then beyond that, because we're going to now expand the sale, we're going to get buying frequency, we're going to get all of these type of things going. And it just changed their mind just a little bit, the mindset. It was like, oh, I am responsible for this for the life of the account now, right? That type of thing. And so I'm going to ask you a question because I'm curious. Does this all start like knowing the target? Makes total sense. We want to go, I don't know, from where we are to, like in the winter for both of us, go someplace warm, right? It's like
right?
get out of the cold. So we have lots of places we can go from the Caribbean to,
Florida.
wherever, right? I mean, Hawaii, whatever. It's a long stretch of land between, and sea. So we need to know where we're going to go. What's the target that the salesperson has to accomplish? And now the hiring process on and around that, I'm going to make the assumption based on what we know that we now have to find that person and test that person for that ideal target role. And depending on the role, that person's going to have a slightly different, say, personality trait or have a slightly different character trait. And we need to be testing for that prior to even offering them the role. Is that accurate?
Um, yes and no.
Okay.
Um, so personality and behaviors, there's tons of assessments and tools out there that address whether how to manage them, right?
Right.
An example, DISC is well known, PI is well known. They've all been assessed against DISC, right? Because DISC has been around the longest.
But
And
personalities change under stress, right?
absolutely.
Okay. So that type of test isn't as accurate as, say, another type of test, right?
Well, what they do with those in relation to salespeople is what they're doing is benchmarking what they do in a social situation
Okay.
compared to what they do every day in a sales role. And what I mean by that is if you go to a networking event, if you go to a cocktail party and you're gregarious and you work the room and you can have fun and everybody loves you, right? That would show up as in a benchmark that you have the skills to be a salesperson.
Yes.
But that has absolutely nothing to do with going to the office on a Monday morning and picking up the phone and making outbound calls. It's got nothing to do with your ability to be able to be persistent, stay in the moment, focus on listening, being curious, having some skepticism, right? So I use a different tool to assess whether or not that these people have the will to sell, the right mindset, the right sales DNA, and then where are the skill gaps? Everybody's got gaps,
Right.
right? How are they? Can we build a bridge? Can we, is it worth trying, right? Should we invest in this person? So I have a tool that predicts sales success. But I mean, that's part of it, right? That helps us go faster and not waste time. But we have natural biases built into like a hiring manager. And at a very high level, because we don't have time to go into all the steps, but the idea is the salespeople are better at selling than the hiring manager. And those natural biases, they fall in love with something that they saw on a resume, was an industry experience. And that if they got 3 years in your industry, but it's 12 months in three different companies in your industry, what does that tell you? Right?
Mm.
That there's a problem, right? But most people see it as industry experience. So these salespeople can do a better job through the interviewing process selling themselves. And unfortunately, what happens is that they sell themselves into a job, and that's the last great sale that they make for the company.
Right.
And that hiring manager's got pressure, We need to find somebody. We got to get somebody in here. Yeah, but it's how costly is it to put the wrong person in?
Very,
Soft costs, hard costs.
yeah, very
Customers.
costly.
Yeah. I mean, and you've had huge teams, so you know there's going to be a certain amount of churn and you're going to make mistakes just with the volume. But if you can keep that number to 8 to 10% turnover and you have 100 salespeople and you can keep that churn low and you keep because 20% of the people are going to be producing 80% of the revenue. That's just
Yes.
how it works. But so better talent is going to make everything else easier. We don't have a problem with accountability, right? You and I are going to hold ourselves to a greater standard than what a sales manager would, right? We're going to hold our feet to the fire. And the average salesperson are going to struggle with that more so that there's more effort. So if we hire A and B players and we have enough of them on our team, then everything else is easier to do. It's easier to coach them. It's easier to get them to follow a process and be accountable to things. It's easier for them to try to get better, to bridge those gaps. So hiring salespeople differently, that's really the message, because and I include myself in this because we're weird. We really can skew an interview. I mean, I've had interviews in my career where I didn't want the job, right? I figured that out within the first 5 minutes. So I just had fun,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To see if I could get an offer.
Yep.
I also realized once that I didn't want the job, and I said all the things that would make sure that I didn't get a job, right? Tell me what you like about prospecting. Like, I don't like prospecting. I don't really do it, right? So you can't tell so we can play that game because we're better at the sales process than the hiring manager. And mostly this hiring manager doesn't really understand what it is that they're trying to find. Goes back to what you said originally, right? If we're not knowing where we're trying to go, it's going to be hard to get there.
Makes total sense. Walter, what if somebody's like listening to this, as I know they are, and they're going, uh-oh, oh, I need help. And and by the way, folks, most of you who are in this position are going to be hiring. You do need help, right? I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I've hired literally well over 1,000 people in sales. And when I was asking Walter about the characteristics, I knew he was going to come forth with what he was saying because he's a professional at doing this. And it's something that if you want a professional, I'm going to recommend you reach out. So, Walter, how do they get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of Walter?
Well, thank you for that compliment. Really, find me on LinkedIn. I'm there every day. I post. I don't post pitching. I post stuff that I think is going to help people think differently about sales. It's going to make them think differently about all the buckets of sales. So that's a great place to find me. Otherwise, they can, ping me at Walter at helixsalesdevelopment.com.
Great. And I think you're being a little modest because I've checked out your LinkedIn and you post really great stuff. Really great stuff. So see, here's the thing, and this is a little braggadocious on our side. We bring people on this podcast who actually understand what the heck they're doing and can convey that. And so you can rely on the content that you're going to find on LinkedIn because we do our research on everyone before they come on to this and make sure that it's the right fit. So, Walter, I want to thank you so much for being here today and bringing your A game as I expected and knew you would. So thank you. And we'll put everything in the show notes, the LinkedIn profile and the email address, as well as the URL. And folks, if you have any questions regarding that, just reach out directly to Walter. Walter, thanks again for being here.
Doug, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.